All right, everyone. About ready?
Unmuted.
All right, on the phone, we're getting ready to start. I think we have everyone. Welcome, everybody. This is a work session of the Anchorage Assembly. Today is May 3rd. It's 11:52 a.m. This is a work session on AR 2024-112, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage approving an amendment to the 2024 capital improvement budget of the Anchorage Community Development Authority and appropriating $215,796 from ACDA General Fund balance to purchase lots 4 and 5, Block 3, Smith Subdivision Number 1, 202 and 204 East Fireweed Lane, and to purchase 2 fourplexes from J Bear for the Attainable Housing Project. We'll go ahead and start with introductions. Mr. Littlefield.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Meg Zalatel.
Christopher Constant on the phone. We have Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Salt.
Here.
Mr. Martinez.
Present. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Right, we're joined by folks from Anchorage Community Development Authority who have a presentation. Mr. Robbins.
Sorry about that. We didn't bring a presentation today. We just brought, I do have a slide up on the screen to just refresh everybody's memory of what these actual parcels are and where they're at. They are on East Fireweed Lane. They are pieces or parcels of property that were foreclosed on by the municipality via tax deed, and then we successfully prosecuted a public use for this property to put in attainable housing. And then this AR in front of us today was our submission to you for budget approval because the timeline of the project didn't match up to our budget submission. We couldn't be certain that we were going to get the approval of the assembly to purchase the lots. And so that's how we got to where we are today. And so I'm here to answer questions and then to provide you with an update and give you some additional information as well. So.
All right, you have a presentation or is it just that slide?
We have a couple of other slides, but I wanted to go to, if there was questions, I would answer those first on this AR before I sort of veer us off in a slightly different direction.
Ms. Zalatel.
Great, thanks. So I just want to make sure, so we already had approved the disposal of these 2 lots for you all to get, right? And this is just making the budget amendment so that that purchase can go through and be done?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm hoping you come with lots of information today about the purchase of the 2 fourplex buildings from J Bear. There's been a lot of talk in our community about repurposed buildings.
Sure.
And some considerable due diligence on old barracks out of J Bear that ended up being really costly in order to bring kind of up to building code standards, habitability standards. So we don't have a lot of information here about what that actual portion of the proposal is. And I think that's where I'm missing information to be able to say yes to this, because this is not just so that you can purchase the lots, but also so that you can have these buildings from J Bear be a part of that purchase as well. So I hope you came maybe with pictures and a concept and all of those things, because that's really what I want to, and a timeline. Thanks.
So I wanted to save us a little bit of time. So I'm glad. Thank you, Member Zalatel. The original AR that we had put forth last year was to purchase these fourplexes from J Bear. And because of the amount of time now it has taken, that has become sort of unrealistic. J Bear has to have these moved by July. We had planned in our original timeline to close on February 1st. That became delayed because the AR was submitted and then delayed. And here it is, we're May 2nd. And it's unrealistic to assume that we can purchase, move, and plant these on those lots prior to the July 1st deadline that the folks at Jaber have. And also, we have additional information on the properties. We completed a phase one on the properties, and the phase one results. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jim Weingartner. He's our project acquisition director, and he's going to just share with you, give you a high level view of what the phase one instructed us in and told us about the property.
Can I ask a follow-up first before we get into phase one? So are you saying that J-Bear barracks are these repurposed fourplexes are no longer a part of this deal?
Correct.
Okay. I also want to note that this item was introduced on April 9th, this AR for reading. So we've only had this for.
Right, we started the
So we've only had this a short period of time,
Right.
quite frankly, a month and a half at this point. We were hoping to take it up, but we had to reschedule this. So I guess because this is back before us on Tuesday, if the two fourplexes are no longer part of the deal, is there an intention to submit an S version of this?
So yes, I didn't mean to insinuate that you had held up the process. That wasn't, we began the process in January with OMB to get the submission done. And so I didn't mean to infer it was your responsibility or the reason that we're here. We're not certain that we want to submit an S version. What I think we're going to ask you to do is to table this until we complete the phase two. But what I'd like to do now is have Mr. Weingartner sort of inform you on that, because while there wasn't a phase two required by the phase one, we felt that based on the information that we received, that it would be prudent of ACDA to make sure that we acted sort of or held ourselves to a slightly higher standard than we would if we were a developer. A developer might look past what the phase one told him and say, this is safe, it didn't call for a phase two, but we believe that we should be held to a higher standard. So if I could let Mr. Weingartner explain what we found out.
Yes, thank you. So Jim Weingartner, ACDA. So in February, we received a phase one environmental site assessment on these lots. And out of that assessment, they found 4 recognized environmental conditions. They call them RECs. And what they were 3 different dry cleaners in neighboring properties. One as close as 65 feet away. And this was back in the 1970s and early 80s. And the plume associated with the dry cleaners includes these lots. And so that's why they categorize it as a recognized environmental condition. So then the 4th one was 2 buried tanks. One was gasoline and one was kerosene, and the neighboring property. And this was back in 1971. Those tanks were no longer in use. There's no record of any kind of removal of those tanks. So this is in the property directly adjacent to it. So those 4 RECs encouraged us to pursue a phase 2. And the phase 2 is estimated to cost $30,000. And we could get that started, but we'd like to use brownfield grant money. We just recently received a grant from EPA to conduct these phase 1s and phase 2. And it's our policy at ACDA to always do a phase 1 before we acquire any kind of property. So that's our recommendation, is to move to the phase 2 now. And unfortunately, we won't be able to do that until a contractor's selected for the brownfield grant, which is going to happen hopefully in July.
Go ahead, Ms. Alto.
Thanks. So you hope to do this before completing the land purchase. Is that correct?
That's my recommendation, yes.
Okay. So right now, then, these lots are held by real estate still?
Correct.
Okay, great. I'm just making sure I'm tracking
no.
the lineage.
For sure.
So you don't need access to the $198,296 now until you complete this phase 2 through the brownfield grant.
That's what we'd like to
Okay.
suggest is that we don't access the funds now, and that we come back to you with once we've completed the phase 2. Would you call it the revised timeline if you would? I have a revised timeline for you to look at as well.
Okay, thanks.
It'll give some.
Yeah, so I think that the gist is postpone indefinitely this item to a future item. And then the conversation hopefully is around thoughts going forward beyond the environmental. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up the Brownfield grant because I know that was a big award that our community got, and I haven't worked in that program, but I do know generally you have to do an assessment before you can do cleanup. That's the phase 1, phase 2,
Right.
and then beyond that, also there's planning money, or there has been. So I think, and I know that's I believe with the planning department. So I just wonder how you guys have interacted with that, because the other thing that I would like to just put on the table really is being strategic about these, right? So I know you guys were focused on these 2 properties, for example, and discovered these issues. I think the question, big picture for the city, and which includes ACDA, is where do we put our public money, or where do we prioritize these cleanups for the best bang for our buck? And so I guess that's just really what I want to ask. And I know that's a bigger question because of this needing the contractor, but that's the whole point of those planning grants, is to do it basically inventory and see what you've got, and then you can prioritize. So I don't know if you guys have talked with planning or know where that is, or how this interacts with that kind of bigger picture.
Through the chair to member Brawley. So we have been interacting with planning because they're a partner in the grant receivable. And there has not been a list of identified projects yet produced because we're trying to do the contractor first. But those items that you brought up will be part of that conversation with the contractor as soon as they're selected. And I don't want to speak for planning or the other partners, but because there's several partners involved, including Aklutna and some other folks in that grant. So Jim can.
I would like to add, though, that this grant could be used for the vacant and abandoned property project that we've got going. We renamed it to
Arnie,
the Anchorage Neighborhood Redevelopment Initiative. And that's where we're going to target abandoned properties. And each one of those abandoned properties will need a phase 1 environmental site assessment. So that's where we can use a lot of that funds.
so if I may add, this project is turning out to be, we of course started this project, and then the other project came, the redevelopment initiative with the abandoned and deteriorated properties, sort of came on the heels of this. But this project is really turning into a poster child for the process in terms of how we'll execute that moving forward as we write our business plan this summer for that larger grant money that we'll be seeking from the federal government. This little project is really going to inform the process and see where our slowdowns are from an internal perspective for the municipality, because we don't want to buy a lot and have it take 3 years to be able to sell to a developer. We'd like to see it. So this is really a good exercise for that project as well. So this is a revised timeline if you'd like to just glance at it, and it just tells you that we began our due diligence period when you approved the purchase last year. We've already been in discussions. As we received the results of the phase 1, we started discussions right before that with, well, not knowing if we could hit the timeline for J-Bear, we started talking to partners about, could we do something better on this lot than put 8 units? Because our goal is to maximize the use of the property. And it is zone B3, so we could put additional units on there. And so we have been in discussions, or we've talked to both NGOs and private developers about these properties. We're talking to planning about replatting them and making them one property so that we could build a larger building at the backside of the property and maybe create 24, 36 units versus creating 8 units of housing. And so it's really actually worked to the benefit of the project and the municipality, that this has gone a little bit slower than what we had anticipated initially. So sometimes things work out well, I think. So, and then so you can see and I will say one thing, that from ACDA's perspective, we believe that this property shouldn't sit vacant regardless of what we find with the with the environmental assessment. But before we can go to our board and say, we need a commitment or we need to be able to spend, X dollars on this project, we want to be sure that we know exactly what the environmental impact will be and what it's going to take to clean it up. So we do anticipate it moving forward regardless of what the phase 2 tells us, unless it, is $500,000 worth of cleanup, then we'll come back to you and say, we don't anticipate it's going to be that size of a project. It should be really similar to what we've encountered over at 8th and K. And we did pretty much the exact same exercise there. So,
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate that we're talking about postponing this. So I guess I'm still thinking about the big picture. So as that moves forward, I guess what I would offer in terms of thinking bigger about other properties is it would be nice to see some criteria or some prioritization, because, one factor would be cost to rehabilitate remediate, I think is the word. Another one would be, are these scattered in different parts of town? Are we making sure that we're focusing on a variety of current landowners, knowing that some of them are mortgaged, some of them are, the banks and so on? Because I don't want to just do basically one owner's inventory, right? That doesn't seem fair. Yeah. But I guess if there's a way to kind of write those down, and as you continue working through I think that's part of what the brownfield planning money is for, is to say, how do we prioritize? Because, for example, one policy choice would be focus on certain parts of town. Another one could be focus on doing as many lots as possible, so lower cost per, and knocking out more of those. Another one could be doing a few lots, but really in key places, or that need the most help, that the private sector is not going to be able to pay for, right? So there's just different ways that you can approach prioritizing. So I don't have the right answer, but I'm just offering some ideas and suggesting that that's part of the kind of an intentional, how we're working through this inventory of properties.
and I will add, thank you, Member Brawley. Those are good suggestions. As we move through the planning process to complete the business plan for the Arnie program, we will engage with you, and other members will be invited, and we'll because those are very good suggestions. We've also thought about deed restrictions once we refresh them, and we've thought about some other things that, as well as some of the things that you mentioned. So those will be used to inform. We've actually, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's off topic, but we will be considering all those things. So,
Ms. Otto.
Thank you. To follow up on Member Brawley's point about the policy choices for the Brownfield grant, I mean, really, I think planning should bring forward to us where they land on prioritization for us to review. It's a policy choice. And I think we should consider that recommendation in the context of the other policy choices and priorities we've made, whether it's the strategic housing plan or some economic development recommendations, whatever it may be, so that we're all on the same page municipal wide about how this money is going to be prioritized, so that there's also a set community expectation for who can access the money. I think there could be, I would hope, significant demand so that we can move forward with a lot of projects. I also appreciate you all taking a pause. I know real estate's not here, but is real estate okay with you taking a pause and holding until potentially September, October 2024?
yes, I spoke with real estate and informed. We've kept the real estate informed every step of the way. Normally, ACDA wouldn't do a phase two. We probably would stop if this wasn't the city's property. We'd stop and say, this is probably not the right way for us to go. But because it's city property, we've decided that it's city property. If it's going to get cleaned up, we should probably do it, even, and develop it, because a private developer probably wouldn't go to the expense. So, but yes, we have been in touch with real estate and they're on board. Wanted to make sure that there was no code challenge with them not closing on the property after they made it available for public use, and everything seems relative and fine.
Ms. Bronga.
I was just wondering, I'm looking at the sky view of this. Looked like they're really narrow lots. Are you anticipating they would be merged together to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we mentioned we've been having meetings with planning and building services and many of Lance Wilbur's departments at ACDA, as well as AWU and other folks. And one of the suggestions that was made by planning was that, why don't we replat this and make it one lot? it's probably a higher use of the property. Whether it ends up being, whatever happens, it's better to have the bigger rather than the longer, narrow lots. So
Mr. Littlefield?
Have we discussed how much the cost is for a replat on those two lots?
we have,
Okay.
we've discussed it. We're not 100% informed on the exact cost, but we have talked about that. Yes.
Not super prohibitive. It's expensive, but not so prohibitive.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, if we've got Mike here, I've got another question.
Uh-oh.
Let's go ahead.
All right. So I'm looking at the budget that had been provided with the AR, and I appreciate that there was significant costs associated with rehabbing those.
Sure.
So what's the backup plan? What's the backup ideas right now? If, the brownfield comes back, your phase 2 comes back, okay, you want to move forward, you get the replat. What kind of housing are you envisioning?
Well, we're envisioning maximizing the use of the space. So we talked to NeighborWorks, for example, about building a 24-plex and having them manage it. We've talked to private developers about what would they see us being able to put there. And so in terms of, our vision, as we told you when we first started this, was to maximize that for housing in that neighborhood. And so that's the kind of a plan that we'll bring forward.
Okay, great. And so it's B3, right?
It is.
So it's the most flexible. Are you considering
Correct.
any mixed use in that opportunity?
Probably not because of the size of the lots. It's probably not going to be mixed use. Plus, there's a lot of mixed use already around it. There's a restaurant right behind it. There's, there's a lot. So I think really what would benefit the area from an activation standpoint would be people living there the
Great.
most.
Great. I'm happy you're reaching out to folks. I would love if there was some kind of RFI, right? So that we could hear from folks maybe that aren't traditional partners as well. Because I think folks are trying to, right? Everyone's kind of focused on housing. And so if your intention is housing and the highest and best use, just kind of see what's possible and out there to inform, since you now have some time. Thanks.
For sure. And we appreciate your comments, members Alatel, because that's really exactly what we're trying to do. Is we reached out to the NeighborWorks, for example, and spoke to their development committee because we didn't know what the ideas could be or how would it work. And we learned a lot talking to them, and we'll continue to talk to other folks that are, we're not going to build apartments. We just want to get them built, if that makes sense. So.
Anyone else? All right, so we will be adjourned then until 12:50 for a special meeting.
Yeah, so I think you can keep a copy. You got a copy of everything you need, I think. Yeah. And you can delete the schematics. I don't think they matter probably.
Muted.
Is it okay? We can give everybody copies of our annual report.
That's our existing report.
Just wanted them to have it. It was hot off the press.
No. Okay. It's just something that we're required to do, so we decide.
Good job, Mike.
We don't make it that far.